Alright, I guess I'll just get started for the replay. There's no viewers right now. So today, May 29th, this is the day that the Ottomans conquered Constantinople. I just thought I'd talk about some generalities about the battle, maybe suggest some books. Um, Also maybe talk about some uh, myths, for lack of a better term. So we've got here, this is an illustration, probably I think 16th century maybe, of Fatih Sultan Mehmed, Mehmed the Conqueror. Prefer to use the Ottoman images just because the European portraits are kind of fanciful. Well, they were doing their best, basically. Um, Not to be too hard on them, but it's Mehmed the Conqueror. He commanded the successful conquest of Constantinople. So I have a little map here. Let me open that up. So this is one of these maps that kind of drive me crazy a little bit. But so we're talking about the blue and some of the pink. So Mehmed the Conqueror uh, really completes a lot of the conquest of the Balkans. I'm just giving kind of the brief overview. And by that point, the Byzantines are pretty isolated. They've got this part of southern Greece. They've got just the city of Constantinople, and that's about it. I think a lot of my subscribers, you guys have probably played EU4, so you know the 1444 map. It's probably burned into your memory. Um, And I guess I just say, so when the Ottomans completed the conquest, it did not become Istanbul. That's a common kind of loaded idea. So the city, like a lot of cities in sort of medieval and antiquity, well, even up until the 19th century, had multiple names. So in Ottoman documents, more often than not, you see Constantinia, which is like the old Arabic term for the city, uh, was not renamed. Sometimes Istanbul is used. Istanbul is actually a Greek word, uh, kind of said with a Turkish accent. That's sort of a good way to think of it, I guess. Kind of an old name for the city. But as far as I've seen in the Ottoman records I've worked on, they don't really use it. And the only other name I've seen that's kind of unusual is Islambol, which is kind of a unique one. Don't see that one that often, but it's called Constantinia for a very long time. And even a lot of the cities were referred to by multiple names. You know, Europeans would use the uh, Greek names, Turks would use Turkish names. It's not really as culturally significant, maybe as people think. Just different words to describe the same thing. So Izmir, it's Smyrna. Um, it's just called Izmir, and Turkish. Uh, and this was part of kind of Mehmed's big push to conquer a lot of territory around kind of the Black Sea, the Balkans, and really solidify Ottoman power. He also undertook a lot of centralizing um, projects. So, the origin of the Janissaries isn't clear, but around about the time of Mehmed the Conqueror, uh, the the kind of the the janissaries and things like that. Also, the palace administration is more solidified. So it's a big transition Ottoman Empire, but it's not the first one. So I always talk about Timur on here, Battle of Ankara. If you watch the videos, uh, that I would say is like another one of these other kind of big moments in Ottoman history where that shakes things up and they have to reorganize things and reorganize society in some way. And then when they capture Constantinople, that's another one of these moments where things kind of slowly change. What happens to the Byzantines? So that's actually an interesting story. So a lot of the Byzantine elites basically become Muslims. So, of course, a lot of them died in the battle, defending the city. Not to take that away from them. But, Byzantine society at this point was pretty in a pretty bad state. There's always civil wars. They've got this tiny pieces of territory, but they're always fighting civil wars of who to be emperor. And that had kind of been a long pattern. So, why were the Turks and later the Ottomans so successful in Anatolia? Uh, some of it was because of, there was conflict in over the medieval period. And of course, I'm simplifying things. So there had been a lot of depopulation, but also over time, the Byzantines hadn't really been, uh, let's say, responsible to the commoners in Anatolia. That's where a lot of they recruited from the military. So uh, you have this empire that's supposed to protect you, but isn't really doing anything. And you have the Turks coming in, and if you've watched my previous videos, Osman, the founder of the Ottoman dynasty, he was just kind of one of many Turkish warlords in the region. Uh, you know, so you've got these Turkish warriors. Maybe you probably don't like them that much. They're Muslims. You're an Anatolian Orthodox peasant or petty noble. But okay, well, they kind of keep the peace. So do I? The choice is to kind of fall in with them or um, to just kind of cling to this imperial government that's not really helping me. Again, I'm generalizing. That's big, um, big generalization, but I'm just giving kind of a resume, as it were. Um, and if you want to read about this, some of these topics, I will recommend a few books. So, a few authors actually. So, if I can get on my soapbox sort of again, uh, most books about the Ottoman Empire that are in popular press are not good, and they try and force modern narratives into it, and they don't really deal with the sources accurately, in my opinion. Um, but that's why I try to promote these academic books, which I don't know is the most thrilling reading, although some of them are very well written, but they are generally a bit better, have a bit more fidelity to the sources, rather than these books that try to create these simplistic, um, narratives about the Ottomans were these forward-thinking empire and they dislodged these backward Europeans. That's a caricature. That's not really history. So let me go to my window share and I can show you some books to, oh, there's the Sultan, books to check out. Let me see if this, there we go. Okay, so this is kind of the classic text. So Franz Babinger, very famous German, or maybe he was Austrian, uh, I think he was Austrian. Let's fact check real quick. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but uh, very famous Orientalist wrote this is kind of the classic book on the Sultan. Um, Unfortunately, if you're interested in footnotes, he wrote the book originally in German, and it's kind of a one of those, I guess, infamous or famous stories in the field that he had planned to write a second volume that was like an appendix that had all the source material and was kind of a discussion. But unfortunately, he passed away, I think in the early 60s before he could complete that. But holds up very well. I mean, he did consult the sources, and again, this was at a time of typewritten manuscripts and stuff like that. So, it was a very labor intensive effort. This edition, which you can find Bollingen Library, I think, published it uh, with Princeton University Press. It has some explanatory notes because this is the edition I've read. So it's on archive. If you want to read it, you have to log in. I think it should be on LibGen. I haven't checked, but I wouldn't be surprised. And also, if you live in a bigger city, this might actually be at your library, like a city library. So, if you're like me and you prefer physical books, this is a good one to check out. Now, on that other topic I mentioned about the Turkish settlement in Anatolia, you may want to look at Spiros Varonis. So he was a famous Byzantinist, and he wrote this book, which is quite famous um, in the field of Ottoman and Byzantine studies, Decline of Medieval Hellenism in Asia Minor, which I've wanted to read, but I have not been able to get my hands on it yet. And as you can see, he uh, died relatively recently. And so those are some things you can uh, read about the late or the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. I guess I'm kind of giving you guys an insight into what being a historian is. It's mostly recommending lists of books. That's a lot of what you do. You hope that your books last, but um, anyway, that's a little vent for me. Um, but anyway, I think I've read some of his other. Oh, actually, I don't think I've read many of his books. This is also supposed to be good. This is more modern history. It's not really something that interests me all that much, but this is about, what it says in the title. There's a very tragic riots in the city about in the 50s. Interesting event. If you're more interested in more recent history, might be one to check out. A friend of mine recommended it. So that's Spiros Vironis. That's his point of view. But Franz Bobinger is pretty good. He moves past. It's not just a straight up biography. This is why the book is so good. Talks about the Sultan, but it's not a straight up biography. He covers social aspects. The other states at the time, because of course, let me go back to my map here. This is kind of the heroic age, we could say, of Hungary. Um, in many ways. So yeah, it's not on this map because it's anyway, it's a different type of map. But but at this point, so this is if we're talking, basically the eve of the fall of Constantinople. Uh, so the Hungarians had lost the Crusade of Varna, that had been a pretty serious defeat. However, what they had been able to do was more or less establish a long peace with the Ottomans that lasts until about, well, and roughly until Mohacs, the disaster for the Hungarians at Mohacs, uh, and when the Hungary sort of is broken into three pieces. But I've talked about that some in other videos. But that's we're still kind of in the high age of late medieval Hungary. They're quite a strong military power. But it's another issue with the politics of the time. The other European states, why did no one relieve Byzantium? Uh, so this is kind of my take on it. I recommend you read the literature and get on JSTOR or stuff like that. But I think my take on it is it was the culmination of a long process of basically a split between Western and Eastern Christianity. And it had kind of been some bad blood back and forth over the centuries. But also, I think the structure of Byzantium in its later centuries, especially toward the end, was not really conducive to um, not really conducive to adaptation. Um, it was kind of relying on um, the title of the emperor, which when you're talking about the end of the empire, I mean, in hindsight, we could say, I mean, what did that even mean, in practice, that you were the emperor of this little, peninsula, basically, and not much else. And, the Turks are at your gates, and, you're not exactly friends with Western Europe. One of those historical, but also, it's just kind of what we call historical contingency. Maybe the Byzantines could have been relieved, if there had been other people or other factors, or the Ottomans maybe lost for some reason. Again, it's just one of those historical contingencies, and that's always hard to. None of it is predetermined. It's kind of why maps like this drive me crazy a little bit. Um, they they kind of make it seem like this was just inevitable. They would have, you know, this um, never-ending expanse of uh, of Ottoman power in the world. So again, about the Byzantium thing, it's just my take. I'm not a Byzantinist, so if anyone has any recommendations for things to read or uh, stuff like that, well-informed things to read, I'm happy to take a look at it. Um, you can see though, I mean, the Ottomans, if we're talking about the pink, they managed to conquer quite a bit in a brief amount of time, relatively speaking. And another thing that's also relevant is the conquest of the Black Sea. So, the Ottomans are able to take control of the Black Sea, which is still very important today, and up until basically the rise of Russia. in the 18th century. It remains kind of an Ottoman lake, if you will. So they're able to take the Crimean Khans as kind of a vassal, and they have a presence there, and they're able to control the Black Sea, and which becomes important, especially when they have to fight in Persia against the Safavids. They go and use the Black Sea, and of course helps with trade down from Russia, back and forth from Russia, and the Straits, controlling the Straits, which is an issue up until the present. Of course, this is a geographically important location in the world. So there's that as well. So I think I'll look at, maybe we'll look at some miniatures now. Maybe, actually, I think I'll show you guys some books, recommend some books, or where to find them. So let me go to my window capture. So uh, this is uh, Brill. So they have a lot of Ottoman books. So, and a lot of good books in general. So, but they're extremely expensive, unfortunately. So let's just search if you're interested in this sort of thing. And they also have a lot of series. So let me go to let's find. So the site is not the most intuitive. So let's go to Middle Eastern history, Middle East Islamic studies, Ottoman and Turkish studies. So I think this might be, yes, so this is the series. I've read a ton of books in this series. They're not all made equal, and some of them, if you just want to read something that's interesting, um, they're not always the most interesting, fun, but you can find some interesting ones. This is one of those ones that's very esoteric, so I might need to. It's interesting to me, but might not be interesting for you guys. But I'm gonna click on that, just look at that quickly. Let's see. So this is an interesting one. So this talks about a lot of the tributary states, um, and a variety of surveys. This is an anthology of articles. Um, talk about these different, auxiliary states, and this is one I've actually read. This has some good articles in it as well. The European tributary states of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries. And this also has some good articles in it. Again, not I guess if you're, maybe if you spend like hundreds of dollars on Games Workshop, maybe this would be better. $138 on a book, you might learn something instead of paying too much on Games Workshop, or any other overpriced miniatures. Um, so there's a lot of books in this series. I'm not going to try and go through all of them. I'm just going to try and find some other ones that might be of interest. Um, this is a lot later, but this is a good book, Ottoman Crimean War. If you're interested in 19th century, I enjoyed this. Very interesting. This is a good study on Aleppo, but more of in my domain as a specialist. This is a good one. Talks about the Ottoman Civil War. This is also very interesting. Ransom slavery along the Ottoman borders. Talked about the trade, the slave trade, ransom slave trade in the Central European borderlands. Very interesting subject. Um, let's see. Like I said, not all of these are like page turner, uh, fun books if you just want to read and learn something. That's probably why, the Babinger book is the most interesting because it's academic, but it's also a good read. Uh, this is an interesting book. This has been super helpful in my own work. So this is about the Ottomans and the Mamluks. I think I've talked about the Mamluks on the channel before. I mentioned them briefly. Interesting society. Yeah. So that's the series. And I've done other book reviews on the channel before, so check those videos out if you want. This one, interesting. Interesting for me, I should say. Like I said, that's not always the most. This is always the most exciting, uh, exciting stuff for everyone. So that's Brill. Um, like I said, expensive, but they have other series. If you want to look at trying to see what type of medieval studies, because they've done some good work. They published some good books there. Where is the? Hmm. They have a series that's like medieval Mediterranean that I'm trying to find, but I don't know. I don't want to sit here and have to make you guys sift through all of these. Um, anyway, if you really like this sort of thing, like I said, you want to check Brill out. You can find a lot of their books online as well. So, um, but I always like having the physical book, whether it's from a library or uh, oh, here we go, book series. Let's see, maybe this will be helpful. Yeah, but a physical book, either buying it or from an actual library. Unfortunately, the people that write these kind of academic titles don't really get much in the way of royalties, so that's why a lot of them um, don't mind their work being, uploaded to the internet because, they just rather people read it than not. think this may be the series, one of the series, later medieval Europe. Uh, wow. Oh, History of Warfare. I think this is actually a really good series. This might actually be more interesting to people. So, and I know Kelly DeVries, he is a good medieval historian at Loyola University. Oh, this looks very good. Contest for Egypt, the collapse of the Fatimid Caliphate, the ebb of Crusader influence, and the rise of Saladin. I may have to try and get this from the library. Um, a lot of different titles. Conflict in 14th century Iberia. That also sounds interesting. Uh, Islamic jurisprudence on the regulation of armed conflict. I may need to check this one out for my own work. Artillery in the era of the Crusades. Wow, I've never actually looked at this series, so there's a lot of great looking books in here. Check the stream here. Check the chat. I don't think anyone's actually watching, but right now, but let me. Oh, it's hard to see. Let me slide this over. Didn't realize that. Um, okay, that should be easier to see now. Put the Sultan back up there. See, is anyone watching? No. Okay. Well, I hope the people on the maybe the people on the replay will enjoy this. Um, so go back to the window. A lot of good books in this series. I think, yeah, I've recommended books from this actually. So let me see. Hmm, got something on the Hundred Years' War for people interested in that. Uh, well, that looks interesting. 7 Years' War. Take a drink here. Oh yes, Holy Wars of King Władysław and Sultan Murad. This is a fantastic book. I think I've mentioned this one on the channel several times now. And also this book, excellent, excellent survey, and nice and long, lengthy too. I think it's, how many pages is it? See if you guys can actually see that. Oh, it doesn't actually say hardback. Maybe if I click that, it'll show the pages. Huh, I guess not. Anyway, very thorough survey. Okay, 462. So by Tomasz Palashval, Palashvaldi, Palashvaldi, I think. My Hungarian's a little rusty now. Um, this looks interesting. Michael S. Fulton. I'll have to look him up. He sounds like an interesting guy. Later medieval Europe. I'm not going to go through all these, but anyway, I think you guys get the idea if you've watched it this far. A lot of interesting books. I think I'll just go through this to the end. I think I've cited work from this one in my own studies, Warfare in Eastern Europe. There's some good stuff in here if you're interested in this sort of thing. This also looks interesting. Series. Um, yeah, like I said, some of these might be a little over technical just for general readers. Might be kind of boring, but um, some of these might be really helpful for wargaming, like articles like this: Polish-Lithuanian Army in the Reign of King Stefan Batory, 1576 to 86. This looks good. Wagenburg and Taborg. I might have to see if I can. I think I have this downloaded actually, so I might have to take a look at this. Um, yeah, I've read this article. That's a interesting one. Um, Ottoman military power. Virginia H. Oxon. She's a good scholar on later Ottoman military history, so 18th to like early 19th century. I've read her books. They're very good. Um, what else? Warfare in late Byzantium. Another one. So much to read. Henry VIII and Francis the First. The Road to Rocroi. This sounds more like a cultural study, but it might be helpful. It might be an interesting book. Um, Mercenary Identity in the Middle Ages. That looks interesting. Vauban Under Siege by Jamel Ostwald. Huh. Have to check that out. Italy and the European powers. Impact of war. She is a good historian. I think I brought up her book that well, the book of the late historian Michael Mallet that she kind of helped complete the Italian Wars, on the Italian Wars. That's quite helpful. Probably the standard text right now on it. But this is kind of a war in society approach to the battles, to the war, I should say. The evolution of European staff weapons. That's an interesting study. Well, a lot of really interesting and very particular studies. So that's Brill. Like I said, these books are not cheap, so try and get them from the library or um, you know, try and find them online because it's pretty easy these days. Let's put the Sultan back up there. Still learning this um, stream stuff. Okay. I think I'll talk about some miniatures. I might change topics a little bit, just because I read a book about the Crusades recently, um, called Victory in the East: A Military History of the First Crusade by John France. Good book, good narrative. I think he kind of goes too far and says, well, religion wasn't really that important. Um, I think that's kind of a product of its time. It was published in the 90s, so people didn't really want to. I guess people didn't want to talk like that or write like that back then. But in terms of the actual military history content, it was good. So I guess we can look at some different miniatures. There's one thing that it made me think about was with the um, the way Crusades era Muslim armies were constructed. So let me go to what footsore. That's where we're going to go because he makes an interesting point in the analyzing the chronicles that the Crusaders were pretty well aware of the difference between Turks and Arabs because a lot of really bad books about the Crusades just talk about Arabs, or the Muslims. I mean, this is like a vassal kind of comparison. Doesn't really understand what was happening at the time. So we have, let's go to armies of the caliphates in footsore. Let me go there. Okay. Maybe let's center this a little bit more. Um, so I wonder if I can do, no, okay, that's not working. Just trying to mess with the window, so sorry about that. Let me expand that all the way again, and then fix it on the, okay. So to make, Crusader armies, it seems like depending on the kind of era and engagement you might want to represent, which again, is a lot of mostly skirmish fighting. You don't necessarily have big, there are battles, of course, but there's not always big armies fighting each other. A lot of it was just raiding, and that sort of thing. So, you could have Arab infantry with, maybe they're led by some, where are their Turks? I think they have Seljuks here somewhere. Um, well, the Ghulams, yeah, Seljuk cavalry or Ghulams, which could represent, armored Seljuks. So you could have some Seljuks leading some Arab spearmen, or vice versa. You could have an Arab local lord commanding his Seljuks that he just hired, that just migrated in from Central Asia, basically, to fight for him. Um, So anyway, just wanted to share that little detail, talk about that. And I think so. I think for the Fatimids actually, so they were the power that the Crusaders fought in Egypt had a lot of black African soldiers, I think. So you could use some of these Moorish characters for to represent the Fatimids potentially. And of course, the Moors are uh, from the Maghreb, so Berbers, Tuaregs, those people who are kind of a different ethnic group than people from sub-Saharan Africa. But anyway, just another idea there. And then let's look at some Khorasan. Uh, so I think they have some crusades. I actually haven't checked. Let's see. Yeah, Arabs, I think you could use these for, yeah, from the late Umayyad Caliphate to the Crusades. Let's look at the yeah, Arab cavalry in 15 mil, Arab cavalry with lances. So if you wanted to go the 15 millimeter route, there's Arabs, and there's also Turks. Let's see, Timurids, Turkomans. I mean, yeah, you could use those to represent just like the mercenary levies. Oh, they also have a Tuareg range. Interesting. Hmm. Central Asian city-states. Well, since it's May the 29th, we should look at some Ottomans from Khorasan. Ottoman Cavalry Command. You could definitely use this for 15th century, so for Mehmed the Conqueror's time. Oh, excuse me, it's a little late where I am. Um, the Ottoman Janissaries with the bow. So these you could use for the 15th century definitely because they hadn't really fully integrated muskets in the 15th century as far as I know. That's more early 16th century, really around the time of Sultan Selim I when they conquer Egypt. That's really when their musketry becomes a really serious asset, and or at least that's what we know from the sources. But for basic kind of infantry, yeah, you'd want some Azabs, that they were like the levied provincial troops, some javelin guys. You got the artillery. Um, so this is, I think, another. I actually should address. I got a comment the other day about like on my pike and shot review, someone said, "Oh no, my opinion about the artillery was wrong because it was so useless back then that the accuracy was just not possible." All I can say is from my reading of primary sources, I don't really see that at all. Was it, in hindsight, was it like rifled artillery like we have in the 21st and 20th century? No, of course not. But was it good enough back then that it caused people to seriously rethink warfare? And did it give, well, especially the Ottomans, a strong advantage in open field combat and in sieges, of course? Yes, especially in open field combat. When they go to fight the Mamluks under Sultan Selim, the artillery is very important when they go to fight the Hungarians and Mohacs. The artillery is also very important. And I should also say that the Hungarians also had their own artillery at Mohacs, not as much as the Ottomans, but they did have it. And so we can also extrapolate that, you know, the the Europeans were also quite good with the artillery that they had. They made it work. So that's my position on that. It's just my academic view. As always, it's always a matter of discussion and informed discussion and looking at the evidence. These are Delhi. I think I've talked about them before. They're kind of like raider, berserker types. That's what they're meant to represent. So yeah, for the time of Mehmed the Conqueror, you want more um, more archers and hand weapons and less guns, except for artillery. They did have artillery, less small arms, I should say. I didn't look at these. Oh, the Tufekci command is nice. I think, yeah, these look good for later Ottoman warfare. Check check how much time we've been going for. Um, so I think I will. No one's watching, so I'll go ahead and wrap this one up at about an hour. If you made it this far in the replay, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it informative at the very least. So I'll go ahead and wrap this up here.